In today's episode, Anna is going to be talking about grace and the 3 key things about how the only way that you can ever experience grace is by being nothing. How do you be nothing? Good question. Stay tuned to find out more.
Hypnosis, mindfulness, meditation, past life regression, RTT, spirituality.
This Spiritual Fix. 2 mystical mamas hacking the self-help game.
With Hannah Fiddler. And Kristina Wiltsey.
This spiritual fix.
This spiritual fix. What is this spiritual fix, Anna?
This spiritual fix is the fix that we're all seeking.
Yeah.
We're all getting high we're getting high off what? Truth and love and shadow work.
Yeah, and it's also a play on words because of the fact that like both you and I have come to recognize that there is no fixing anything. Like I read something today, like you don't get past your issues, you just get big enough so that your issues move past you or something like that, like changing the perspective, right? Like there's nothing to fix.
There's nothing to fix, so it's kind of a joke, but
It is, especially because over the years, both you and I have done a lot of spiritual fixing. Like whatever was the coolest thing that we could find, we were just like, let's do that. Oh, that's so amazing.
yes. And I took one of Matt Kahn's courses. I love Matt Kahn. And in that, he has this great analogy. He says, you know, people think of their spiritual practice as a car that they're tinkering with in the garage. And they're like, I want to get this and I want to get that. And I want to fix this and I want to fix that. He's like, just get the car out of the garage and drive it. And I feel like a lot of us do that. We're constantly looking for things in us to fix.
Yeah.
Things to add away, take away, but like just drive your car.
Yeah. And that's the funny thing. In our next episode, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the most popular meditation sects and like the ones that borderline cult. And like they definitely touch on that whole thing of like, I'm going to fake it and then never even make time to make it. Like, you know what I mean? Like it just becomes this kind of thing where you're like just talking about the spiritual fix and talking about how you're so happy and yet you don't actually get a chance to experience it because you're spending so much time
Fixing yourself
and creating this fake light for others, if you know what I mean. That is for another subject. So what's been going on in your life?
What's up? Well, this week I wanted to talk about grace.
Yeah.
If you remember in the last time that it was my turn to talk, I spoke about having a vision with this monk who in essence told me all about acceptance and how accepting everything as it is the key to joy, really. And I've been playing with that this week, which was awesome. At one point, for example, I got, you could say, rejected over the phone about some issue. And I was totally present in my feelings of rejection and I accepted them fully. And it was just like he said, behind that rejection and sadness was this overwhelming surge of joy. Yeah. And I'm like, that's what he meant. He said, if you just accept it all, you're going to find that there's joy behind. It's not sadness or joy. It's both. You know?
I was just listening to a song in the car by Depeche Mode and it's called I Feel Loved. And it's like, through the pain and the emptiness comes a feeling of inner bliss. I feel wanted. I feel desired. I can feel my soul on fire. But there's like, and then it just says, I feel loved. Like it's like through the pain and the suffering, through the heartache and trembling, I feel wanted. I feel desire. I can feel my soul on fire. It's like this it's an amazing song. I absolutely adore it. But it's like, it has that same idea of like through all of the suffering, ultimately, I just feel loved, or I feel joy, or I feel
it's
whatever
behind
this
it all.
is. It's behind it all.
When you accept it and let it flow.
Yeah, I have had a really hard time of that this week. I would love to think that I like had a, it's definitely not been easy lessons at all. Like I've just been thrown into this kind of gauntlet. I have this concept of this thing called the medicine of place, in which when you're in a place, it has a certain amount of karma that it feels it has the opportunity to kind of let you experience, right? And I'm in a situation right now where all my family's in the same place, and it will probably be the last time that happens for years, if ever, right? It'll never be like it is right now. And we're coming to the end of this like very intense year.
Because your sister is moving and your parents are following.
Exactly. So I've been triggered so many times in the last like 2 months by everything that's happened. And finally, it was like, so I was in meditation on, I guess it was 3 days ago now, and I didn't even get a chance to tell you this, but like I was in meditation and I was like, I'm going to do a feeding your demon, right? Because I could feel self-hatred about like, because what happens is like every time I go with my family, I feel this feeling of like not liking who I am with them.
Can we explain what feeding the demon means?
I will. I'll totally explain it. Yeah.
Okay.
But so ultimately, I was trying to recognize the fact that I had this massive kind of demon of self-hatred that always showed up whenever I'm around my family, because I kind of joke that my family it's like we don't allow each other to have enough space to like mess up. We're just like all so close together, and we have so many fuses and so many matches that you never know if you're just going to like accidentally turn around and just like light someone's fuse. Right. And then you don't even know it, and then you don't even hear about it. And then all of a sudden, like weeks later, you have to kind of deal with the consequences of accidentally lighting someone else's fuse, even though we all know that we're kind of constantly triggering each other. And what we need to do, this is Luke, my husband, said this yesterday. He was like, you guys just need to give each other more space to be like, oh, that's what that person does. Isn't that funny? Let's just forgive that and just be like, ha, 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 ha. Anyway, feeding the demon is a process in which you, instead of trying to banish or destroy your demons, you actually succumb to your demons. Like you feed them whatever it is that they need and whatever it is that they want, because it's another way of accepting a part of yourself, as opposed to trying to say like, oh, because banishing a demon and banishing a pain body or banishing like any of the different names that we have for these things, it just kind of delays.
Right. You're suppressing it.
Yeah.
You're trying to suppress that aspect which you've
Right.
personified as a demon.
Yeah. So what are the steps?
Well, the steps come from a book called Feeding Your Demons, Ancient Wisdom for Resolving Inner Conflict. And it comes from a woman named, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, Tulstrium Alion. And she's one of the few female Buddhist leaders in the country. She's comparable to Pema Chodron. And the feeding your demon is basically you choose an aspect of something in your life that's bothering you and you personify it. So in your case, it was self-hate. Mm-hmm. I've done it before. I was like really, thinking my husband should do this, my husband should do that. So I personified the romance cop demon. Mm-hmm. Like I have a romance cop demon and she's over here telling me what he should and shouldn't be doing in the name of love, which is so silly because, who wants a cop in your marriage? But anyways, the point is, so basically you personify the issue at hand. In your case, it was self-hate. Mm-hmm. And you close your eyes and you visualize them coming to visit you. And you have a conversation with them. And you ask them what you want. And you basically just give them everything that they want. And in the end, they either dissolve or they will turn into what she calls an ally, and they'll bring you a message of deeper understanding. And the idea is that we're always unconsciously fleeing from our demons, mm-hmm. that we never actually just stop and say, well, what's your message for me? Because it's in that listening to your message and not fleeing from it that you can actually make peace with it.
You can accept it.
Yeah, and accept it and stop the unconscious running from it, which, as we know, the more you resist, the stronger it gets. So that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. Yeah. So this was an interesting one because what ended up happening is this is where it gets weird. I saw that I had some sort of like metal, it felt like some sort of technology on my spine, like that my spine was made out of metal, which is interesting because I have this, like, I went through this kind of process of finding my inner dragon and all this kind of stuff. And my dragon was made out of steel. It was made out of metal, right? And so what ended up happening was that kind of, I got an ally from this experience of feeding my demon, and they pointed out the technology that was on my spine, the metal technology that was on my spine, and then they upgraded me to crystal. And then my dragon turned into crystal. And it's been really strange because like in the last couple of days, I've been cutting ties, like all these really old tethers that I have to like my self-value, like giving myself value to my family, giving myself value to like, I feel grown up. Like, I literally feel like I grew up in the last couple of days. Like, I'm just no longer like, I don't know. I think there was a part of me, a very strong part of my inner child or something like that, that was always seeking validation in the projection of my family. I do not give a fuck anymore. Like, I literally, I feel grown up. I honestly feel like I'm an adult for the first time. I've felt like imposter syndrome in adulthood I've been an adult for a long time now, like 20 years. But it was really amazing. So
Congratulations.
yeah, that was my
big.
week. So Grace.
So when I had the breathing session with that monk which I discussed second to last episode. So he said that there's 3 different ways to remove resistance: conscious resistance through awareness in the present moment, unconscious resistance through removing mental patterns and habits and belief systems and trauma from the past. And then he said the 3rd way is grace, but he didn't tell me what that meant. And it's funny, I was in my kitchen and it suddenly dawned on me. I was just cleaning the kitchen, and I suddenly dawned on me like, oh my God, he didn't tell me what grace was because he wants me to experience what grace is. So before I get into that, I just wanted to just talk about grace according to different religions or perspectives, right? Mm-hmm. So in my research on grace, I found that in Buddhism, they believe that there are bodhisattvas that come to this earth and they will give grace. I think they do it through darshan, where they touch the finger, to the third eye, or it's through a look or a touch. Mm-hmm. But the idea is that grace can be bestowed on you if you just come in contact with the right master or the right bodhisattva. According to Christianity, grace was already given, and that was the salvation of man, was that grace has already been given and humans are already saved. And since I was not raised Christian, I really don't understand this one. Can you explain?
Yeah, I can do a bit more. It's because it's a really fascinating concept, especially in the way that it can kind of get a little bit convoluted. Because to me, grace in the Christian idea is that grace is the Jesus as the Savior came and he basically said, I'm forgiving you your sins. So if you think of grace as the act of releasing karma so you don't actually have to experience it, or the act of releasing sin so you don't have to actually experience like the consequences of it, which is to go to hell, then Jesus said, I'm gracing you with a free ticket, like a get out of jail ticket. And so anything, as soon as you believe in me, this is for obviously like certain sects and it's different. And I don't know enough about Catholicism and all these different things to be able to tell you the difference within Christianity, especially between Protestants and Catholics, or then all the different sects of Protestants. But the basic idea is that God bestows grace on anyone who believes that Jesus is Savior, as their Savior. When that happens, and as long as they kind of maintain the things that they need to in Catholicism, or as soon as they're born again, with born again Christians,
you get your get out of jail free card.
Yes, thank you. And so once you do that, then you're good. The thing that I find is inconsistent is that grace can be bestowed randomly, like in the sense of like, sometimes I think it's equivalent to the experience when you and I have like a revelation of some sort and we're like, oh, I get it. It's like all of a sudden something lifts so that you can go higher to understand something. Because grace is not about like things being less bad. It's about you being more accepting of them.
Well, according to Hinduism, it mentioned what I read, that there's not much about grace, and that self-realization is something that needs to be earned.
Right.
As far as Islam goes, it says that the road to paradise is not through deeds alone, that Allah must grant grace. So in Islam, there's a combination of the two. You must have the self-realization and the good deeds, and then Allah will also grant you grace.
Oh, that's interesting. Going back to Hinduism, I remember Yogananda, right? So in Autobiography of a Yogi, he talks about grace and about how his guru, Sri Yukteswar, he had to do a lot of work. I feel like Yogananda, this has been a while since I've read this, but Yogananda had to do a bunch of work. And then Sri Yukteswar was like, okay, now I'm going to grant you this experience of samadhi, and I'm going to grant you this experience. And in order to be able to have this samadhi, this like higher experience, he needed to get rid of a lot of karma that Yogananda had taken on. And so he actually took his karma onto himself, and he got sick after that. Right. So it was like an experience of like the guru. Again, it was like almost like a mixture of the Buddhists, where a guru had to go and say, I will actually take your karma. It still has to be meted out, like it still has to express itself, but I'm choosing to express it instead of having you to have to express it.
Very interesting. I had this big debate with my husband when we were dating about this, because he believes strongly in grace, and I believe strongly that I had to earn it through my diligent vipassana meditation. And we had a lot of deep debates about that. And in the end, I agree with him that grace is possible. All right, so back to the kitchen. I'm in my kitchen, and I have this realization, oh my goodness, the monk wanted me to experience grace. He didn't want to tell me about it. So the issue or thing, I guess you could say, I've been working on the most or most aware of lately is that at the core of like all issues, abandonment, fear, rejection, self-esteem, being good enough at this, good enough at that, at the core of it all is actually just self-hatred. Like self-hatred's an octopus with many arms. And at the core, at the head of all of our conflict is actually just self-hate. But there is no hatred, there's just resistance. So it's like resistance to self. So I'm like, I want grace. Like I want to be given grace to remove self-resistance. Like why do I resist myself so much? Because it all comes down to self-resistance. Wouldn't you agree? Mm-hmm. So I'm in the kitchen and I'm like, aha, he wants me to experience grace. And I hear him in my ear and he's like, yes, I do. I want you to experience this. Get on the floor and kneel. And I'm like, my kids are in the other room watching TV. My husband's working. I'm like, I don't even care at this point. If a monk's telling me to get on the ground and kneel, I'm going to do it. So I get on the floor and I kneel. Like I get in that position and I put my head, he's like, put your head on the floor. I put my head on the floor, very grounding. He says, be humble. And I'm like, okay. So I start focusing on being humble and I'm like, I'm humble. Like I'm humble. I am. And getting in that position really helped because I'm like, I'm so low. Like there's so much above me. Like I'm going to just be humble. And I was getting really in touch with that feeling of humility. And he's like, make it bigger, expand it, magnify it. And I'm like trying to cultivate humility as strong as I can. And I'm feeling it. And then he says, okay, good. I got the sense like you got it. And he says, I want you to say over and over again till you feel it, I am nothing. And I'm like, okay, I am nothing. I am nothing. I am nothing. And I just say it over and over and over again until I'm like, oh my God, I feel it. Like I'm nothing. Not in the sense of like, I'm a bad person. I'm a nobody. I'm low. It wasn't a value thing. It was a I don't really exist thing.
Yeah, it was an emptiness. Like you're not even the vessel that holds everything. It's just like.
Exactly. It was kind of like this wall around me kind of like broke. And I kind of like, there's nothing. Like I'm nothing. I get. And then he says, he's like, when I get to that point and I'm crying at this point, I'm nothing. Because it's kind of beautiful. He says to me, okay, now say, I accept that I am nothing. And so I'm again chanting with my head on the floor. I accept that I am nothing. I accept that I am nothing. I accept that I am nothing. And it was feeling so good, like so much resistance releasing. And I got to the end of that. He says, now forgive that you are nothing. And I start to forgive. I say, forgive that I am nothing. I forgive that I am nothing. Like I forgive that I ever thought I was anything. And I forgive that I am nothing. And I do that over and over and over again until he says, okay, good, good, good. Now say, I am grateful that I am nothing. Again, go into it. Crying now. I am grateful that I am nothing. Like I'm like grateful I get to participate in this illusory world where we think we're something and we're just nothing in this sea of nothing. And I'm grateful for it. And I'm just like, I'm grateful to be nothing. I'm grateful to be nothing. And in the end, I just felt really good and really happy. And I feel like I came out of that experience understanding like, what is the head of the octopus? We resist ourselves. What do we resist about ourselves? the fact that we're actually nothing. And like, we're afraid to let go of who we identify with. We identify as mother, career person, the person who likes to eat this food, the person from this country, the person who speaks this language, this person who looks like this. Like, we identify with so much. And when we can recognize that we're really just nothing, we have to, like, all these identities just shatter. And I think that's extremely scary. And I think that's what the head of the octopus really is this resistance to the fact that we are none of the things that we think we are.
No, I think it's not. It's funny because I agree. I think on one level it is very scary, and I think on another level, like when you told me the steps and I did it myself, I was so relieved.
It's relief.
Oh my God,
it's so relieving. like fuck. Who cares? I'm nothing. Like, who fucking cares?
It's so relieving. Like, I literally was like, oh my God, this is what makes sense. I was like, this is, and it's like anytime, because I like have a fair amount of depression that I experienced, and I felt like I was in kind of like almost like a minor depressive mood at the time, and I did that practice. And then afterwards I was like, holy shit, I don't feel depressed anymore, because I feel like depression is like the step above just being like, I am nothing and I love it. And I am so relieved that I am nothing.
I am so relieved to be nothing. I would love to make this like a daily practice. I've not done it a lot since then, but it is just so relieving to be like, I am nothing. But well, anyways, and in that context, I feel like I was given grace, when I was given grace in the sense that I was given a jewel by some omnipotent or enlightened being. I was given this jewel of a message, and that was my grace, which was just, hey girl, you're nothing. Don't be so full of yourself.
Right.
And
he also said, didn't he also say that the only way you can bestow grace is if you are nothing, right?
Oh, yes. He also said, when I was like at the end, he said, grace can only be given to nothingness. And I thought about that a lot. What does he mean, grace can only be given to nothing, to the nothing? I'm like, well, if you're full, there's no place for the grace to go, But if you're empty, you can be that chalice, that cup to receive nothing. And that's why humility was the key component too. Like, let's be humble. Let's recognize we're nothing. Let's let ourselves be filled up by something greater than ourselves.
Yeah. And I love how you were telling me about how, I'm never going to remember the name, Sukyo Mahikari. What is it?
Oh, Sukyo Mahikari.
Yeah. So what are the tenets of Sukyo Mahikari? They're
I'm
very
not
similar.
familiar enough with this to know, but when my children were babies, we were blessed to have a nanny who had been like a high priestess in the Sukyo Mahikari Japanese religion. And the three major tenets are acceptance, gratitude, and humility. And I don't know enough about it to speak on it. It's a great thing to look into, but...
Right. And I just think it was great because, I remember you took me to the temple.
The Sukyo Mahikari, yeah.
Right when my son was born, like when we had moved back to Atlanta. And I loved it because when you go into, they were so excited to see us, even though we were bringing like 4 kids who were all really young and loud. And they showed the orange. Like in the foyer, they have like an orange that's been sitting in a jar for 2 years that didn't have light given to it, like didn't have the thing. And then they had one that was like mostly still preserved. Right,
because they give light. That is like their fundamental teaching is like give light unto the world. It's kind of like Reiki, but I'm not sure how it's different. It's much different. They say it's much better, but I don't know what it is exactly.
Yeah, but I love to see those parallels between like you were basically told the process of receiving light, right? Which is the process of acceptance, gratitude, and humility. Starting with humility, then going to acceptance, then going to gratitude. And I think that forgiveness has a lot to do with acceptance. I think that they can kind of like, I think that it helps for us to distinguish the words and say this is acceptance and this is forgiveness. But
right. Yeah, forgiveness is a little bit beyond acceptance. It's like acceptance with a dash of grace.
With a dash of grace. I like that. Yeah. And actually, I'm going to talk about that in the next episode, so we can go into that more. But that's amazing. And so how have you felt after this? Like, how have you felt with grace?
Nothing. Just kidding. I feel grateful. I feel really grateful. I feel like the walls of my self-resistance are coming down.
Yeah.
I think there's so much more to it. I would love grace to just take them all away in a quick flash, I guess, like the way it did for Eckhart Tolle or, other people. They get the instant grace removal. of karma. But
Yeah.
I think that's very rare. I think the reality is it's a slow climb. And I'm grateful for what happened. Yeah, I'm grateful to recognize that I'm nothing.
Yeah. I think Eckhart Tolle said, I feel like he gave an explanation as to why he had that really quick one.
I think he wanted to kill himself. He was in the self-hate. Like he was in the self-resistance.
He was in self-resistance. And I think it was something like, it's like when you get so low in suffering and you are so steeped in suffering, then something just snaps. And that is what can do it to you, right? Like, it's like this idea of, not that we're necessarily going to dive deep into the darkness in order to get to the light, but like, that is definitely a practice. It's a very legit practice that a lot of shamans in particular, or shamans as they say in England.
I think he like folded into his self-hate and he was like totally in it and like, who is this in here? Yeah. And he just surrendered completely and accepted completely that he was full of self-hate. I think from what I remember in The Power of Now, and then he went into some sort of cathartic darkness, and when he woke up he was just different.
I think that key thing that you were saying is that grace can only be given to nothing. So go back to the original religions that you're talking about, right? And even in the ones where you need self-realization, I mean, isn't self-realization nothingness?
Right. Isn't self-realization coming to just empty yourself of all your shit?
Exactly.
And so making yourself more and more of an empty vessel.
Right. So Jesus was saying, I mean, like, you know, if you kind of, if I'm going to hybridize this a little bit with the Course in Miracles, which is a channeled document from Jesus, right? So it's like, yeah, okay, I'm not like a true fundamental Christian in that respect. But one of the things that they talk about in the Course in Miracles and what they talk about in some Christian interpretations of the Bible is that Jesus talked about forgiveness and he talked about all these different things, but, they kind of go on to say that it was Jesus could see us as we are. And because his vision of us as we are and of himself as we are was so clear, he couldn't experience any pain because he like literally didn't have anything. He had nothing. He was so nothing. He was so with God in a human body that he was just like looking, and he was just like, he wasn't suffering up on the cross. Like we use the cross as a crucifix as the image of Christianity, which is so terrible. And it would be amazing if only the interpretation was he actually isn't in pain. He is not suffering for our sins. He is going through this to recognize that he is not in pain because he is nothing. And because he is nothing, then therefore we are nothing. And that is how he forgives our sins, because he's giving us a model in which we can see that there are no sins to forgive.
And there is no death.
That too, right?
Right.
Right. And
So I guess in conclusion, so this idea of nothing actually reminds me a lot about a book I listened to maybe 10 years ago called Zero Limits by Joe Vitale. And he studied under a Ho'oponopono master in Hawaii. And in it, he talks about zero limits. Like you want to get to zero. You want to get down to nothing. You want to remove it all out, because at the bottom of nothing is zero. Is love. Are you familiar with Ho'oponopono? Just kidding. I know you are. Can you tell us a little bit about your Ho'oponopono experience?
Yeah, it's funny because what I love is that, this is what always happens, right? Is that like you learn one thing from one thing and then you realize that all these other people are doing the same thing. And
just
then you're
different
like,
names and different techniques for the same thing.
So the best reference for Ho'oponopono is the Tracy Chapman song. So the Tracy Chapman song, Baby Can I Hold You? And it's like, baby, can you hold me tonight? Da, 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 da. And then it says,
she gives all the steps of Ho'oponopono.
Sorry, right.
I'm sorry. Forgive me. I love you. She doesn't say thank you.
She doesn't say
thank you. But it's implied
you.
with the beautiful song.
Yeah.
The beautiful song is the thank you.
The great beautiful song is the thank you. But the steps being, I'm sorry.
Please forgive me.
Forgive me. I love you. Thank you. In different orders. But Ho'oponopono comes from Hawaii originally. And you may actually know more about the history of it than I do. But we can put more in the show notes and a link to where it actually goes with Ho'oponopono. But the idea is that forgiveness in particular, I see Ho'oponopono as a healing process that triggers massive change within us, because what it does is it says like the kind of version that I do of Ho'oponopono is this. It's called true forgiveness, right? Is like the name of it. And it's something that comes from the Course in Miracles. And it's this idea that like that there actually isn't anything to forgive. right? Like there's like this whole idea that like it's the same thing as what Jesus is saying with sin. Like there's no sin, right? Is like you actually haven't done anything wrong, which is really hard to if you're on the level of form, if you're on the level of interaction, you're like, of course I got hurt. I need or somebody hurt me. I can forgive them. I have the power to forgive them. But it's like, no, actually what it comes down to is that there is nothing to forgive because you're already perfect. You never stopped being perfect. And you're just like that total person who can't suffer, who's like sitting on a crucifix and can't suffer, or who's sitting in a chair and can't be hurt. That doesn't mean that you go around and you like hurt everybody and you're like, oh, well, everyone's perfect. Because we still live in this world. We still live in the illusion. So, you know, I'm sorry says, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry that I am a co-creator of this reality in which I perceive error.
I'm sorry that we have co-created this hurt together, but it's going to give us an opportunity, and then asking for forgiveness. But I think it's also actively giving forgiveness, because I mean, that's the thing with forgiveness, right? Like you ask for forgiveness, sometimes it feels a little bit weird to me, like, because you're like, please forgive me. And then all of a sudden they can just like continue to hurt you by not forgiving you. And then if you make it conditional, you know what I'm saying? Like if I'm trying to say like, the only way I'm going to be okay is if you forgive me.
Right. My understanding of the saying forgive me is I'm saying, forgive me for believing that there was ever any error in the first place.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah. I'm sorry that I helped co-create this world where I inferred error or wrongdoing. Forgive me for believing in that, for believing in the duality, for believing in this illusion.
Yep.
I love you, meaning I see who you truly are, and you are me and we are nothing.
Yep.
And then thank you. Thanks for this awesome game of illusions.
Right.
and giving me the chance to heal that part of me. And the point is like you can do Ho'oponopono to anything. You see horrible things on the news, and if they are part of your reality, you need to forgive them because you have co-created them. If they exist in your reality, it's because you've drawn them there into your reality to be forgiven and healed.
Exactly. And so paralleling back to grace, I'm sorry, forgive me is humility.
Yes, that's true.
Right. And then you have
I love you.
And then you have I love you, right? So you have acceptance, right? I feel like
forgiveness and I love you.
Forgiveness and I love you is acceptance, and then obviously gratitude.
And perfecting it, seeing it in its perfect state.
Right. So again, there's literally the fifth thing I think that we've talked about, maybe the fourth thing that we've talked about that follows these same three steps.
Yeah.
Like in some form or another, humility,
acceptance, and gratitude. It's a beautiful, beautiful trio.
Yeah.
And Tracy Chapman says it best. If only we had the copyrights to just play that song at the end.
Exactly. That'd be so nice. So yeah, I think it's really important, and it's not an external thing. I think that's important for us to say too, is that like, I can, when I'm talking about like, please forgive me, I feel like you just need to say it to yourself. Like, please forgive me, self. Like, whatever part of me thinks that I did something wrong that needs to be forgiven, or whatever part of me that feels as if I've harmed something. It's like, actually, I just need to say this to myself continually. Like, I'm like, it's just always directed. Like, yeah, it helps to direct it to other people because that may help, but it's like a self practice. It's a practice of like you becoming the person who's cutting through all of the Maya, the illusion, and just saying, there's nothing to forgive. Right. And I love you and I feel loved.
And it's a great practice to do when you're not charged just on anything and everybody. But it's a great practice to do when you're upset with someone and look at them and think, and you in your mind, just look at that person, and you say it. Like someone told me about their abusive father, and I've not met the father. And I just like conjured up that father in my mind and thought of all the horrible things he did to his kids. Mm-hmm. And I just kept saying, I'm sorry, forgive me, I love you, thank you. Which sounds really odd. Like, why am I thanking this abuser of a father? But it was more like, I'm sorry I co-created a world where there is the victim perpetrator.
Exactly.
Forgive me for believing you're bad and like believing in this duality.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, everything that comes into our existence, when you get to a certain level of, and this isn't level as in like, I mean, I kind of think of it as a level in the game, right? Where it's no longer about stealing other people's energy, and it's no longer like you kind of get over that whole like, this person wronged me and they have to pay kind of vengeance thing, even if we all fall into that. It really does come down to everything that comes into your existence, whether that's the hatred of a political figure or seeing a whole bunch of people dying somewhere or
Being stuck in traffic. It's like the analogy you gave was like a spindle, like a receipt spindle, and you just got this crank and it's just rolling, like feeding, like everything falling into your awareness, everything in your reality on this timeline, this endless spindle. It's just there for you to forgive and love and accept. Forgive, love, and accept. That's the whole game.
Yep, that is the whole game. All right, we're done.
We're done. Bye.
We don't need to talk about anything else now. Just do that. And we're just going to do that. And then in a couple of years, the world won't even have to exist anymore.
Bye.
Bye.
Like this episode? Be sure to rate us so that we can get on New and Noteworthy, because we are a brand new podcast and we're really trying to do some good stuff here. Also, you can like us on Instagram at this.spiritual.fix. Thanks so much and have a wonderful day. Hi, Kristina, co-host of This Spiritual Fix. Has listening to our podcast stirred up something for you with the primal wounds? The good news is you have access, and that is the first step to transforming these wounds. We created support packages to help you through this process, and they're available on our website, www.thisspiritualfix.com. These packages were designed by Anna and I, combining techniques and hacks from our own experience working through our own wounds. Each packet contains a workbook and 2 meditations, one about forgiving those who have wounded you, including yourself, and one about reprogramming old beliefs. You can buy an individual support package, or for those next level processors, all 5 packets: abandonment, injustice, rejection, betrayal, and humiliation. Available on our website and our shop.